Prime Matters, in collaboration with Slaking Thirsts podcast, presents the Christian Mythic narrative, The Deep History of the World. PrimeMatters.com is a groundbreaking project of educational outreach of the University of Mary, awakening the Catholic imaginative vision. Episode 27. Jesus establishes his reign.
Upon entering Jerusalem, Jesus marched up to the temple, followed by the crowds, and it is not too much to say, took possession of it. God, veiled in the humanity of Jesus, was coming to his own house, and Jesus proceeded to act as the one who had ultimate authority there. He drove out the pack of money changers with a whip, overturning their tables and scattering their coins and their records, and declaring that the temple was God's dwelling and was not to be profaned. He then took up his place in the temple precincts and began to teach the crowds. Shaken by his acts, the high priest responsible for the temple sent a delegation to him. They nervously asked him, "By what authority are you doing all of this?" It was a polite wording of a sterner message that ran, "We, not you, are in charge of the temple and all its activities. You have no business here and no right to do what you are doing. Leave peaceably, lest stiffer action be taken." They would have immediately seized Jesus, except that the crowds were too many for them and were hanging on his words. When Jesus saw that the high priests had rejected his claim to authority just as they had rejected that of John the Baptist, he sent them away unanswered. So it went on for the next many days leading up to the Passover feast itself. Jesus would arrive at the temple early in the day and would teach the gathered throng, while the Romans watched, and the high priests, along with their Pharisee allies, ground their teeth looking for some way to stop him, whether because they thought him a false teacher or because they feared an armed insurrection and the iron hand of Rome. Anticipation was intense. Then an opportunity fell into the laps of the Jewish authorities from an unexpected source. A man of Jesus' inner circle, Judas Iscariot, approached the high priests and offered them the information they needed to capture Jesus when he was away from the crowds. One of Jesus' own picked men, who had lived with him during his entire public mission, who had heard his words, seen his miraculous deeds, and shared his mission and his close friendship, betrayed the Son of God into the hands of his enemies for 30 silver coins. Judas had arranged matters such that the authorities would take Jesus by surprise in a private garden area where he would be found with a few of his disciples late on the evening before Passover. Earlier in the evening, before that time arrived, Jesus held a gathering of the 12. It was a solemn moment for them. They realized that the hour of their master had come. They had marched with him into the capital, stood with him as he claimed possession of the temple, heard his prophetic denunciations of the religious authorities in that sacred place, and witnessed the response of the populace. Now, at the time of Passover, a fitting feast for enacting the new Exodus and raising the banner of the new kingdom, Jesus had called them together to celebrate the traditional Passover meal, commemorating the act by which God had freed the Israelites from slavery. One can only imagine the mingled excitement, awe, and sobriety experienced by the 12. These were the men who had been privileged out of all humanity to share the mission of the long-foretold Messiah King, his labors, his plans, his desires, his battles, the most intimate aspects of his life. Now the king was about to enter into his own. They knew themselves to be at the very heart of the world's drama, on the eve of some of the most significant events of all time. They gathered around their master on this great occasion, eager to know what he might say or do. The gathering proved equal to its anticipated importance, though the disciples did not fully realize until later what was occurring. Jesus was following a script written by the Father and unknown to his followers. Later they would grasp its full significance, once he had walked the road laid before him and had retrospectively taught them what it meant. For now, Jesus told them many things about the coming kingdom and what it would demand of them. He astonished them in stooping to the position of a slave by washing their feet, underlining his earlier teaching about what it meant to be his follower and to serve his mission. Most momentously, he gave them notice of the new covenant he was about to establish with Israel. Having sent his betrayer away, he took the bread and wine of the Passover celebration, showed them to the disciples, and announced that he himself was the fulfillment and the true meaning of both the Exodus and the Sinai covenant. This is my body offered in sacrifice. This is my blood, the blood of the new and eternal covenant, poured out for forgiveness and salvation. He was giving them a lens through which to understand coming events. He was showing them that he was in process of fulfilling the whole of the law, with its history, its sacrifices, and its promises. Yet they still had no idea what it would cost their king to come into his kingdom. Having finished the meal, Jesus led his disciples to the Garden of Gethsemane, where they had arranged to spend the night. There he commenced his final hand-to-hand combat with his enemies, both demonic and human. There he prayed, and for a time his humanity was nearly overwhelmed by the ghastly horror of what was coming upon him. It was not the physical torture alone that was troubling him. Other men had faced similar pain with fortitude and endurance. It was rather the spiritual agony he was about to encounter that so unnerved his human nature. What could it have meant to be humanity's scapegoat, to have the entire weight of human guilt pressed upon his shoulders? What would it mean for him to be delivered, seemingly defenseless, into the pitiless hands of that dark spirit who hated God and ruled the world? Yet the new Adam stayed the course and emptied himself in love to the last. The whole of his earthly mission had been a continuous act of obedience to his heavenly Father. Now, even as he faced the ghastly prospect of crucifixion, he embraced his Father's will for the sake of those he had come to save. If all this could pass me by, O Father, but only let your will be done. The story of the passion and death of the Messiah King is well known and often told. Here it will be enough to recall it in brief outline. As had been arranged by Judas, the soldiers of the high priest came upon Jesus in the middle of the night, seized him, and hauled him before the high priest and the council. The disciples, confused and taken unawares, fled in fear. Peter and John later recovered their wits and followed at a distance. At the house of the high priest, Jesus was tried in the middle of the night by the Jewish authorities and declared to be a blasphemer who deserved death. Unable by Roman law to execute the death sentence, the council went early in the morning to the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate, with the demand that he put Jesus to death on their behalf. "We have a law," they said to him, "and by that law he ought to die, because he has made himself the Son of God." Yet knowing that Pilate would not be moved by internal matters of Jewish religion alone, They also accused Jesus of claiming to be king in place of Caesar, thus playing upon Pilate's worry of a Jewish insurrection. Pilate questioned Jesus and was intrigued by the answers he received. "Are you the king of the Jews?" he asked. Jesus told him, "If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would be in the streets fighting. But as it is, my kingdom is not of this world." Not finding Jesus politically dangerous or guilty of any obvious crime, Pilate wanted to let him go. But when it became clear that the only expedient action was to accede to the wishes of the high priest and the council, Pilate took the easy way out. He had Jesus first scourged and then consigned to death by crucifixion. The prescribed 39 lashes came close to killing Jesus. Men often died under that scourge. He was then tied to a plank of wood that would be used as a crossbar, and was forced through the streets to a hill called the Skull, where the crucifixion would take place. Crucifixion was among the most brutal forms of execution ever devised. It was meant to last a number of days, maximizing pain, inducing terrific thirst, causing muscular convulsions throughout the body, and eventually killing by slow asphyxiation, all the time exposing the naked, accused man to the derisive eyes of those passing by. It was reserved by the Romans for the worst of criminals. Jesus was nailed to the cross and crucified between two such criminals, with the ironically intended but accurate explanation of his crime attached to the cross: the King of the Jews. Being close to death already, Jesus endured his torture on the cross for only about 6 hours. The high priests and the other religious leaders, who had been powerless against Jesus' prophetic denunciations and had plotted in vain to kill him, now came to gloat over their victory. "You called yourself the Son of God and the King of Israel," they taunted him. "Fool! Let us see if you can come down from that cross." With Jesus at that final hour were only Mary his mother, faithful to the last, and accompanied by a few other women followers, and his beloved disciple John. Peter, caught by fear, had denied any connection with him. He and Jesus' other friends and disciples were nowhere to be found. After finally entrusting the care of his mother to John, Jesus said the words, "It is accomplished," and with a great cry, he died. Thus did the true King do valiant battle against his demonic foes, offer his life in sacrifice for a guilty humanity, and come into his reign.